This man is now going to demonstrate the proper procedure for shaving and bathing in the field.
Yes, sir.
Right, soldier?
No, sir!
No, sir, what?
No, sir! I am not going to shave, sir!
12 convicted killers, 1 suicide mission, and a production so chaotic that the director almost quit 3 times before filming even started. The Dirty Dozen wasn't just a war movie. It was a calculated middle finger to everything Hollywood thought war films should be in 1967. Lee Marvin leading a bunch of psychopaths and murderers on a suicide mission behind enemy lines in Nazi-occupied France. Charles Bronson before he became a household name, playing a soldier who'd rather punch you than talk to you. Jim Brown at the absolute peak of his athletic career, transitioning from the NFL into one of his first major film roles. And Donald Sutherland in his breakout role, playing a character so unhinged and bizarre that the studio executives wanted him fired after watching just 1 day of footage. The film made $150 million worldwide in 1967 against a budget of just $5.5 million. That's over $1 billion in today's money. It spawned countless imitators, from The Expendables to Suicide Squad to every heist movie featuring misfits and criminals. But what most people don't know is that behind the camera, the production was just as violent, unpredictable, and rebellious as anything on screen. Fistfights between stars, actors staying drunk for weeks, near-fatal accidents, and a director who fought the studio over every creative decision. These are 19 weird facts you didn't know about The Dirty Dozen. Number 1. The entire film was almost canceled because MGM thought the script was too violent and morally reprehensible. When the studio executives first read Robert Aldrich's screenplay in early 1966, they were horrified. The climax involves locking German officers and their wives in an underground bunker, pouring gasoline down the ventilation shafts and burning them alive. Women screaming as they realize what's happening, children dying in their mother's arms. The whole thing played out in excruciating detail across 4 pages of script, with Aldrich describing the sounds of people clawing at locked doors and the smell of burning flesh. MGM's head of production called an emergency meeting and told Aldrich it was the most disgusting thing he'd ever read in his 30 years in the industry. He said American audiences would riot. He said the film would be banned in half the world. He told Aldrich the film would never get made unless that entire sequence was removed. Not toned down, removed completely. But Aldrich refused to budge even 1 inch. He argued that war wasn't supposed to be clean or heroic. It was supposed to be ugly and morally complicated. He said if MGM wanted a sanitized version of World War II, they should hire someone else. The studio executives told him they would. The standoff lasted for weeks. Aldrich threatened to walk away from the project entirely and take the script to another studio. MGM threatened to sue him for breach of contract. Lawyers got involved. Finally, after nearly a month of negotiations, MGM relented, but only after Aldrich agreed to cut down the screaming and showed less of the actual burning on screen. Even with those compromises, the final cut still shocked audiences when it premiered in London, with several people walking out during that scene. Number 2. Lee Marvin was so method during filming that he stayed drunk for most of the production. Marvin played Major John Reisman, the cynical officer tasked with turning criminals into soldiers. To get into character, Marvin decided his character would be a functional alcoholic, so he became one. Cast and crew members reported that Marvin would show up to set in the morning already half drunk. He'd sip whiskey between takes, sometimes straight from a flask he kept in his costume pocket. By the afternoon, he'd be slurring his lines and stumbling through scenes. Director Robert Aldrich didn't stop him because somehow the performance was working. Marvin's boozy, world-weary delivery made Reisman feel authentic, like a man who'd seen too much war and didn't care anymore. But it created chaos on set. In one scene where Marvin had to climb a rope ladder, he was so drunk he fell off twice. The stunt coordinator had to rig a safety harness that wouldn't be visible on camera. Marvin didn't even remember filming that scene when he watched the rough cut months later. Number 3. Telly Savalas terrified the entire cast by staying in character as the psychotic Archer Maggot even during lunch breaks. Savalas played Maggot, a religious fanatic and rapist who quotes scripture while fantasizing about violence. It's one of the most disturbing characters in any war film. And Savalas took it seriously. Too seriously. Between takes, while the rest of the cast joked around and relaxed, Savalas would sit alone in the corner of the set, muttering Bible verses under his breath and glaring at people with dead eyes. He'd walk up to female crew members and stare at them without saying a word, breathing heavily. Cast members started avoiding him in the commissary, taking their lunch breaks in their trailers just to get away from him. Charles Bronson finally confronted him one day, telling him to knock it off. Savalas just smiled and said he was preparing. Bronson reportedly told him that if he pulled that creepy act one more time, he'd prepare for a broken nose. Savalas dialed it back after that, but the damage was done. Even after filming wrapped, some crew members refused to work with him again. Number 4. Jim Brown almost walked off the film after a racist confrontation with a British crew member. Brown was one of the biggest names attached to the Dirty Dozen. He'd just retired from the NFL and was transitioning into acting. But on set in England, he faced open racism from some of the local crew. One lighting technician repeatedly made racist comments within earshot of Brown. At first, Brown ignored it, but one afternoon the technician called him a slur directly to his face. Brown grabbed the man by his shirt, lifted him off the ground, and told him that if he heard one more word, he'd throw him off the scaffolding. Director Robert Aldrich intervened and fired the crew member on the spot. But Brown was furious that it had taken that long. He threatened to leave England and abandon the production. Aldrich personally apologized and promised it wouldn't happen again. Brown stayed, but he later said that experience soured his entire time on the film. Number 5. The famous War Games sequence where the dozen humiliate the regular army officers was completely improvised. In the film, there's a sequence where Reisman's ragtag group of criminals defeats a well-trained army unit during a training exercise. The regular officers are left looking like incompetent fools, standing around in confusion while a bunch of convicts run circles around them. It's one of the most satisfying moments in the movie, and audiences cheer every time. None of it was in the original script. Not a single word. Aldrich came up with the idea during a production meeting when he realized the middle section of the film needed more energy and momentum. He told the actors to just wing it and see what happened. Lee Marvin, Donald Sutherland, and the rest of the cast showed up to set that morning with no script and no plan. They made up their dialogue on the spot, riffing off each other like a jazz band. The scene where Sutherland pretends to be a general inspecting the troops, doing that bizarre high-pitched voice and exaggerated mannerisms, was entirely his idea. He just started doing it, and everyone played along. The military advisors on set were furious when they saw what was happening. They said it made real soldiers look stupid and incompetent. They complained to Aldrich that the sequence was disrespectful to military protocol and would damage the film's credibility. Aldrich looked at them and said that was the entire point. The scene stayed in, and it became one of the film's most iconic moments. Number 6. Donald Sutherland was almost fired after his first day of filming because the studio thought he was too weird. Sutherland played Vernon Pinkley, the slow-witted soldier who impersonates a general during the War Games. His performance is strange, offbeat, and completely unforgettable. But MGM executives watched the dailies from his first day and panicked. They called Aldrich and demanded Sutherland be replaced. They said his line delivery was too odd, his facial expressions were too bizarre, and audiences wouldn't understand what he was doing. Aldrich disagreed. He thought Sutherland was brilliant. Aldrich refused to fire him. The studio threatened to shut down production. Aldrich called their bluff and kept filming. When the executives saw the War Games sequence, they finally backed off. Sutherland's performance ended up being one of the film's highlights, and it launched his entire career. Number 7. Charles Bronson and Lee Marvin got into a fistfight on set over a poker game. Bronson and Marvin were friends before filming started, but their friendship didn't survive the production. One night, during a poker game in Marvin's trailer, Bronson accused Marvin of cheating. Marvin laughed it off. Bronson didn't. The argument escalated. Marvin, who was drunk as usual, threw a punch. Bronson punched back. The two men brawled in the trailer, smashing furniture and knocking over a table. Other cast members had to pull them apart. The next morning, both men showed up to set with black eyes and bruised knuckles. Aldrich asked what happened. They both said they fell. Nobody believed them, but Aldrich let it go. The tension between them is visible in certain scenes, and some film critics have noted that their on-screen dynamic feels genuinely hostile. Number 8. The film's climactic chateau assault was shot in a real French manner that the production nearly burned down for real. The finale of The Dirty Dozen involves the team infiltrating a chateau full of Nazi officers and setting it on fire. To make it look authentic, Aldrich wanted to use real fire, not just special effects or miniatures. He wanted actual flames consuming actual walls. So the crew rigged the entire building with controlled burn points, gasoline lines, and remote ignition systems. The plan was to set small fires in specific locations that could be easily contained and extinguished. But during the first take, everything went wrong. The fire spread faster than expected, jumping from one room to another through the ventilation system. Flames engulfed parts of the building that were supposed to stay untouched, including a 17th century library with irreplaceable books. The crew scrambled to put it out with fire extinguishers, but the fire was spreading too quickly. Someone finally grabbed a hose and started spraying water everywhere. The owner of the manor, a French aristocrat who had leased it to the production for what he thought would be a harmless film shoot, came running out of his nearby residence when he saw smoke billowing from the windows. He started screaming in French that they were destroying his family's property, that the building had survived 2 world wars and now Hollywood was burning it to the ground. He demanded they stop filming immediately and get off his land. Aldrich promised to pay for all the damages. The owner demanded they stop filming right now. Aldrich kept the cameras rolling anyway, telling the crew to get every angle they could. The footage they captured that day, with real panic and real chaos, is what ended up in the final film. The manor required extensive repairs afterward, and the production had to pay an additional $50,000 in damages. The owner refused to ever rent his property to another film production again. Number 9. Clint Walker, who played Samson Posey, broke 3 ribs during the chateau attack sequence and didn't tell anyone until filming wrapped. Walker was a former bodybuilder and one of the toughest men on set. During the chateau assault, he had to carry heavy equipment while running through explosions and fire. In one take, a piece of debris hit him in the chest. He felt something crack but kept going. For the next 2 weeks of filming, Walker was in constant pain. He didn't say anything because he didn't want to delay the production. He took aspirin between takes and gritted his way through every scene. It wasn't until the final day of shooting that he went to a doctor and discovered he'd been working with 3 broken ribs the entire time. Aldrich found out months later and was furious that Walker hadn't said anything. Walker just shrugged and said he'd been through worse in the gym. Number 10. The film was banned in several countries because of its anti-authoritarian message. The Dirty Dozen wasn't just controversial because of its violence. It was controversial because it celebrated criminals and outcasts while mocking military authority. That didn't sit well with governments in certain parts of the world. The film was banned outright in Spain under Franco's regime. It was banned in several South American countries with military dictatorships. Even in the United States, some military bases refused to screen it because officers felt it undermined discipline and respect for the chain of command. The irony is that Aldrich had served in World War II himself. He knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to make a film that questioned blind obedience and showed that heroes don't always wear clean uniforms or follow the rules. Number 11. Robert Ryan, who played the antagonistic Colonel Breed, hated the role so much he tried to quit halfway through filming. Ryan was a respected actor who had built his career on playing complex, morally conflicted characters. Colonel Breed was the opposite. He was a one-dimensional, by-the-book officer who existed purely to be an obstacle for the heroes. Ryan felt the character had no depth. He told Aldrich he was wasting his time and talent. Aldrich convinced him to stay by promising to add more layers to Breed in the editing room. That never happened. Ryan's performance is fine, but he was right. The character is paper-thin. Years later, Ryan said, "The Dirty Dozen was one of his least favorite films he'd ever worked on. He admitted he only took the role because the paycheck was too good to pass up. Number 12, the iconic training montage was added in post-production because test audiences found the middle of the film too slow. When Aldrich screened an early cut of The Dirty Dozen for test audiences in Los Angeles, the feedback was brutal. People loved the beginning and the ending, but they said the middle dragged. The film needed something to keep energy up during the second act. Aldrich went back to England and shot the training montage 3 months after filming wrapped. It wasn't in the original script. The sequence was assembled using footage from different scenes, new footage for the montage, voiceover narration, and a driving score that Frank DeVol composed. When Aldrich screened the new cut with the montage inserted, test audiences loved it. The scores jumped dramatically in every demographic. The montage became one of the film's most memorable sequences, that classic moment of criminals transforming into soldiers through repetition and discipline. It's been parodied and homaged in dozens of films since, from Stripes to Guardians of the Galaxy to every sports movie ever made where an underdog team trains to beat the odds. And it almost didn't exist. Number 13. Ernest Borgnine improvised his entire death scene because the original version was too quick and unsatisfying. Borgnine played General Worden, one of the few sympathetic authority figures in the film. In the original script, his character was supposed to die off screen in an explosion. Borgnine thought that was a terrible way to end the character's arc. He approached Aldrich and asked if he could have an actual death scene. Aldrich agreed. Borgnine improvised the moment where Worden realizes he's been fatally wounded, tries to radio for help, and collapses. The scene only lasts about 30 seconds, but it gives the character a proper send-off. Borgnine later said it was one of his favorite moments he'd ever performed, even though most people don't even remember it. Number 14. The film's premiere in London turned into a near riot when anti-war protesters stormed the theater. The Dirty Dozen premiered in London's West End in June 1967, right as anti-Vietnam War protests were heating up across Europe and America. A group of activists saw the film as pro-war propaganda, another Hollywood glorification of violence and militarism. They decided to make a statement that would get international attention. During the premiere, about 50 protesters rushed into the theater from different entrances, clearly coordinating their attack. They unfurled banners that read, "Stop glorifying murder," and "Hollywood profits from war." They started chanting slogans, drowning out the dialogue on screen. Some of them threw pamphlets at the screen and into the audience. A few tried to chain themselves to the seats using bicycle locks, hoping to force the premiere to be canceled entirely. Security guards and local police had to forcibly remove them, dragging protesters up the aisles while cameras from news crews captured everything. Some protesters went limp, forcing officers to carry them out. Others kicked and screamed, yelling that everyone in the theater had blood on their hands for supporting war films. Aldrich, who was in attendance with the cast, stood up from his seat in the middle of the chaos and shouted at the protesters that they'd completely missed the point of the film. He said The Dirty Dozen was anti-war, not pro-war. He said it showed the moral corruption of sending criminals to do your dirty work. The protesters didn't care, they kept chanting. The premiere was delayed by 45 minutes while police cleared the building, and several people were arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. Number 15. Trini Lopez, who played Pedro Jimenez, quit the film halfway through because his manager told him it was going to flop. Lopez was a popular singer in the 1960s. He was cast in The Dirty Dozen to broaden his acting career. But his manager was convinced the film would be a disaster. He told Lopez that the script was too dark, too violent, and too weird to ever succeed. Lopez believed him. He asked to be written out of the film. Aldrich was furious, but he agreed. Pedro Jimenez was killed off in an early battle sequence, and Lopez's scenes were hastily rewritten. The character was supposed to survive until the end. When The Dirty Dozen became a massive hit, Lopez publicly admitted he'd made a huge mistake. His manager had cost him a role in one of the most successful films of the decade. Number 16, John Cassavetes, who played Victor Franco, was so difficult to work with that Aldrich vowed never to hire him again. Cassavetes was a brilliant actor and filmmaker, but he had a reputation for being combative on set. He constantly questioned Aldrich's directing choices. He rewrote his own dialogue without permission. He argued with other actors about their performances. Aldrich tolerated it because Cassavetes was undeniably talented, but by the end of filming, Aldrich was done. He told friends that Cassavetes was the most exhausting actor he'd ever worked with. He said he'd rather work with a dozen Lee Marvins, drunk and all, than deal with Cassavetes again. Cassavetes, for his part, said he enjoyed the experience and thought Aldrich was a great director. He just didn't understand why Aldrich seemed so angry all the time. Number 17. The film's famous theme music was composed in less than 24 hours because the original score was rejected. Frank DeVol was hired to compose the score for The Dirty Dozen. He spent weeks working on it. When Aldrich heard the final version, he hated it. He said it was too traditional, too heroic, and completely wrong for the film's tone. DeVol had less than a day to come up with something new. He went home, stayed up all night, and wrote the iconic military march theme that everyone associates with the film. He brought it to Aldrich the next morning. Aldrich listened to it once and approved it on the spot. That theme has been used in countless trailers, commercials, and parodies ever since. DeVol later said it was the easiest piece of music he'd ever written, and it became the most famous. Number 18. Lee Marvin insisted on doing his own stunts, even though his insurance policy explicitly forbade it. Marvin had a clause in his contract that prohibited him from performing dangerous stunts. The studio didn't want to risk their lead actor getting injured, but Marvin ignored it. He insisted on doing every physical scene himself. During the rope bridge sequence, Marvin was supposed to let a stunt double handle the crossing. He refused. He climbed across the bridge himself, drunk, in the rain, with cameras rolling. Aldrich didn't stop him because the footage was incredible. When the insurance company found out, they threatened to pull coverage for the entire production. Aldrich lied and said it was a stunt double after all. The insurance company didn't believe him, but they couldn't prove it. Marvin never faced any consequences, and he kept doing his own stunts for the rest of the shoot. Number 19. The Dirty Dozen was originally supposed to have a happy ending, but Aldrich changed it because he thought it would be dishonest. In the original script written by Nunnally Johnson and Lucas Heller, all 12 members of the Dozen survive the mission and return as heroes. They get pardons, they get medals, they walk off into the sunset as free men who prove themselves through combat. It was a classic Hollywood ending designed to make audiences feel good. Aldrich thought that was ridiculous and completely dishonest. He argued that a suicide mission should actually result in deaths, not a miraculous group survival where everyone makes it out without consequences. He said the whole point of calling it a suicide mission was that people were supposed to die. He rewrote the ending so that only 2 members of the Dozen make it out alive, with several others dying in brutal, unglamorous ways during the chateau assault. The studio fought him hard on the change. They said audiences wanted a happy ending, especially in 1967, when the country needed feel-good entertainment to escape the reality of Vietnam. They said killing off most of the main characters would depress viewers and hurt box office performance. They threatened to replace Aldrich if he didn't shoot the original ending. Aldrich said audiences wanted honesty, not lies. He said they wanted to feel something real, not just manufactured sentiment. He refused to shoot the happy ending. The studio eventually backed down, but they made him shoot an alternate ending, just in case test audiences hated the deaths. He shot it, but he made sure it looked terrible so the studio would never use it. When the film was released with Aldrich's ending, critics praised it for its realism and emotional weight. They said the deaths gave the mission actual stakes and made the surviving character's victory feel earned. It's one of the reasons The Dirty Dozen is still considered one of the greatest war films ever made. Aldrich was right. The honest ending is what made the film unforgettable. The Dirty Dozen wasn't just a war movie, it was a rebellion against everything. Against studio executives who wanted safe, sanitized stories about heroic soldiers saving the day. Against military authority that demanded blind obedience and respect for the chain of command. Against audiences who expected heroes to be clean-cut and morally pure, to fight fair and win clean. Robert Aldrich made a film about criminals, drunks, rapists, and psychopaths, and he turned them into icons. Lee Marvin stumbling through scenes half drunk and giving the raw performance of his career. Charles Bronson punching people between poker hands and glaring at anyone who looked at him wrong. Jim Brown standing his ground against racism on a film set thousands of miles from home. Donald Sutherland being too weird for his own good and not caring what anyone thought about it. The production was chaos from day one. The film was controversial and brutal, and it changed action cinema forever. If you want to see how another rebellious war film broke all the rules, that video is on screen now. And if you made it this far, you're clearly into deep dives on classic movies. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.